When love is real, when it arises from the deepest center of the human soul, it is not something that is acquired, possessed, or lost. It is not a matter of performance, of pleasing or clinging, nor does it depend on the continuation of shared circumstances. It is, rather, the quiet recognition of something eternal, something remembered, not learned. When two people truly meet, not the outer layers, not the personas, but the true centers, they recognize each other not as strangers, but as something already known, as if the soul whispers, "I know you. I have seen you before the beginning." Most people confuse this with emotional intensity or romantic chemistry, but such things are fleeting. What I speak of is not fiery passion that burns out, but a silent, steady warmth, something that grows even in silence, something that persists in absence. When this kind of love is present, it does not demand constant contact, nor does it fear time. It is not afraid to lose, because it knows nothing essential can be lost. The bond is not forged in the surface events of the relationship, but in the invisible resonance between two inner worlds. When two souls are truly connected, it is not their personalities that fall in love. It is not the carefully polished identity, not the desires or ambitions, but something far beneath that. A knowing that arises from the archetypal layer of the psyche. One soul recognizes itself mirrored in another. This recognition is wordless. It is like returning home after being away for a very long time. Not to a place, but to a presence is a quality, a vibration that says, "Here I am. I never left." The mistake of the modern mind is to reduce love to a transaction, to imagine that it is earned through being good enough, attractive enough, useful enough. But this is not love. It is a contract between masks. True love needs no justification. It does not need to be explained. When it is real, you do not fall into it as if into a trap. You awaken into it, as if you have remembered something essential to your being, something that had been sleeping within you. This kind of love may enter your life quietly, almost unnoticed, or it may arrive like a thunderclap that reorganizes your whole perception of yourself. But regardless of how it appears, it never flatters the ego. It does not confirm your fantasies. In fact, it often exposes them, because genuine love calls you to be more than you are, and if the soul sees itself clearly in another, it cannot unsee what it has seen. That is why, even if you walk away, even if life sends you to opposite ends of the earth, the connection does not dissolve. You may suppress it, deny it, reinterpret it, you may tell yourself it was an illusion, but underneath all that, in the quiet moments of solitude, the presence returns. Perhaps not as longing or desire, but as a strange certainty that something real once passed between you, and still exists. This love does not demand possession. It does not say, "You must be with me." Instead, it says, "You are part of me." And that knowing grants a kind of peace, even in heartbreak. For you understand that love is not only the union of two people in the outer world, it is the uniting of two energies in the depths of the unconscious. It is not something you do, it is something you become. When you have met someone at that level, even if only briefly, your soul is changed. You cannot go back to sleep. You cannot pretend that shallow things will satisfy you. You cannot settle for roles and games. That encounter becomes a reference point, a sacred center, and though you may spend years without speaking, though your lives may unfold along different paths, the connection endures. Because it was never bound by time or space to begin with. It was never about shared routines or agreements. It was about resonance. Two inner landscapes that recognize their complement. So let no one tell you that you imagined it. Let no one convince you that love must always end when people part. If the love was genuine, it has not ended. It has merely changed form. It now lives within you, shaping you, whispering in your dreams, guiding your growth. And when two souls are joined in that way, they are never truly apart, not in the places that matter. You know it in your silence. You know it in your ache. You know it when you least expect it, when their presence arises within you like a familiar breath. That is how you recognize genuine love. It is not bound by logic, not broken by distance, not silenced by time. It is the soul saying to another, "You are part of my becoming." There is something curious about the way the soul operates, so very different from the noisy movements of the ego. The ego, with all its plans and distractions, moves forward and forgets easily. It turns away, pretends, rationalizes, buries. But the psyche does not forget. It remembers everything that truly touched it. It records not events, but meanings. And when a connection between two souls is genuine, that memory becomes part of the soul structure, woven into its very fabric. Even when two people drift apart, even when silence falls like a curtain between them, the inner world still holds the imprint of that bond. People often speak of moving on as though it is simply a matter of will, as though time erases everything. But time erases only what was shallow to begin with. What was never real dies quickly. What was fantasy vanishes like smoke, but that which was rooted in truth, that which awakened something in the unconscious, remains. It does not fade. It waits. Perhaps hidden beneath layers of distraction, perhaps numbed by pain, but always alive in the deep, because the psyche, unlike the ego, is not concerned with appearances. It is concerned with essence. When you have loved someone from the center of your being, truly loved them, not for what they gave you, not for what you projected onto them, but for who they were in their most vulnerable, radiant self, that love does not simply vanish. The mind may say it is over. The heart may break. The ego may flee to other faces and places, but the soul holds on. Not in desperation, not in clinging, but in reverence. It remembers because it recognizes that something sacred occurred, even if it was brief, even if it ended in pain. You may find yourself thinking of them in moments you cannot explain. You may dream of them, unbidden. You may hear their voice echoing inside you when you face something difficult, and you wonder, why now? Why still? But the soul knows that some connections are not finished just because the world says they are. The bond may have become invisible, but it is not gone. It simply continues in another dimension, one that the conscious mind cannot fully access. There are many who fear this. They are frightened by the idea that love could persist beyond time and circumstance. They want closure, finality, certainty. But love does not obey those demands. The connections that shape us most are not always meant to end neatly. Some are meant to linger, to mature quietly in the background of our becoming. Sometimes the other person's physical absence allows their spiritual presence to deepen. We carry them not as memory, but as part of who we are now. The ego cannot comprehend this. It wants to categorize, to explain, to declare something finished. But the unconscious knows that some souls are tied together by threads that the rational mind cannot see, and the psyche will bring that connection back into awareness when the time is right. Often through dreams, synchronicities, or sudden emotional waves. Not to torment you, but to remind you that something once awakened in you is not yet complete. You see, the soul is not interested in convenience or comfort. It is interested in growth, in truth, in integration. If you truly loved someone, and that love revealed something essential in you, the psyche will not allow that revelation to be discarded. Even if you try to suppress it, it will reappear, sometimes in the face of a stranger, in a poem, in a piece of music. The soul will speak again and again because it is faithful to what matters. And this can be confusing. You may ask yourself, why do I still feel connected? Why does it hurt, or haunt, or heal in ways I cannot control? The answer is simple, because it was real. Because the meeting of those two souls was not just a chapter, it was a turning point in your inner life. Even if they are no longer beside you, their presence shaped your journey, and your psyche does not let go of what it knows to be sacred, this is not a failure to let go. It is not emotional weakness. It is the deep intelligence of the soul at work, holding space for what still has meaning. And perhaps one day, that connection will surface again, not necessarily to be rekindled in the outer world, but to be understood, honored, and integrated in the inner one. You do not need to chase it, and you do not need to fear it. You only need to listen. Because when something is truly yours at the level of the soul, it will not be forgotten. Not by the part of you that knows what is eternal. We often imagine that love, if it is genuine, should be free from conflict. That it should be smooth, harmonious, and always affirming. But that is not the nature of true connection. That is the illusion of fantasy, the dream of the ego, which longs for comfort without challenge, closeness without exposure. Real love, the kind that reaches into the depths of the soul, does not avoid the shadow. It meets it, it stirs it, and it survives it. When two souls are truly joined, their bond does not remain on the polished surface of personality. It descends into the inner world, into the forgotten corners of the psyche, and there, in those depths, it begins to awaken things that have long been hidden. Wounds from childhood, fears of abandonment, unconscious projections, ancient patterns inherited from generations. True love does not simply admire the light in the other. It touches the darkness too. It reveals what has been repressed. It calls forward everything that must be seen, not for the sake of pain, but for the sake of healing. This is why many run from real connection, because the moment it ceases to flatter the ego and begins to expose the truth, it becomes frightening. We begin to see not only the beauty of the other, but their wounds. And more painfully, they begin to see ours. We cannot hide in roles or performance. The masks fall away. And in that vulnerable, naked space, we are asked to love what is not yet whole. We are asked to remain when the other is not pleasing, not perfect, not easy to understand. And that is the test, not of infatuation, but of soul. To truly love another is to look into the mirror they hold up to you and not turn away. It is to allow yourself to be seen, not only in your strengths, but in your weaknesses, in your shame, your fear, your doubt. It is to allow the other to witness your inner world, not just your curated image. And this can be terrifying, but it is also where the transformation begins. Because love that cannot survive the shadow was never love, it was attachment, idealization, fantasy. The shadow, when it enters the relationship, does not come to destroy. It comes to deepen. It comes to purify. When a connection is real, it will be tested. Not to break it, but to strengthen it. Not to punish, but to initiate. The moments of misunderstanding, of conflict, of distance, these are not signs that the bond is broken. They are signs that the unconscious is at work, asking each person to grow beyond their limitations. Sometimes the relationship must go through fire. Sometimes it must fall apart so that both can see what they are truly holding. In these moments, it is easy to say, this is no longer love. But what if these moments are exactly what real love requires? What if the eruption of old wounds is not the end, but the beginning of something more honest, more grounded, more enduring? It is in these difficult passages that we discover whether the connection was a temporary arrangement of personalities or a meeting of souls. Because the soul does not flee from pain. It does not abandon when discomfort arises. It stays, it listens, it learns. It reaches into the wound, not to judge, but to understand. And this is the miracle, that love, when it is genuine, can witness the other in their most fractured state and still say, I am here. Not because it is easy, not because the ego is being satisfied, but because something deeper recognizes that this is part of the journey, that this moment too belongs. And through that presence, through that unflinching commitment to truth, the connection is not weakened, it is made indestructible. The greatest test of love is not in how much pleasure it brings, but in how much darkness it can hold without collapsing. Can it contain your tears, your rage, your silence? Can it stand still when your inner world is storming? Can it allow you to be completely human, not just desirable? These are the questions that genuine love answers, not with words, but with presence. When love is real, it does not avoid the mess, it enters it. And through that sacred confrontation, both souls emerge not only closer, but more whole. And that is how you know the connection is real. It does not run from the shadow, it walks through it, with you. There are moments in life that cannot be explained. You may think of someone just before they call. You may dream of them on the night they are silently thinking of you. You may walk into a place you've never been and feel them there, though they are nowhere near. And you wonder, is it imagination, coincidence, or is it something deeper, something hidden behind the veil of rational understanding? When love is genuine and when the connection between two souls is real, life begins to speak in symbols. What seems like chance becomes a language. And in this language, synchronicity becomes the handwriting of the soul. When two people are deeply connected, their inner lives are no longer separate. Though their bodies may be apart, their energies begin to intertwine. It is no longer a question of physical proximity or shared time. A thread is formed, a subtle, invisible bond that pulses with meaning. And life, in its quiet and mysterious way, honors that bond. Through symbols, signs, and sudden alignments, it keeps reminding you that what is real does not fade. It echoes. You may be walking through your day, mind occupied with ordinary things, when a song plays that takes you back to a moment shared. Or a stranger speaks words that pierce you with familiarity, as if carrying a message not meant for them to deliver. Or you see their name in a place it should not be, as though the universe placed it there just to awaken a memory. These are not accidents. They are clues, not from the mind but from the depths, reminders that the connection still breathes. We are taught to dismiss these moments, to trust only what can be measured. But the soul does not measure, it perceives. And when it recognizes a link that transcends logic, it begins to communicate through these strange, unexplainable coincidences. Synchronicity is the soul's way of saying, pay attention. Something unseen is at work here. This is not a trick of fantasy or longing. It is not an illusion born from grief or hope. It is a reflection of the way two inner worlds, once joined in truth, remain attuned to one another beyond the limits of time and space. Just as the moon pulls the ocean from miles away, a genuine connection pulls at the fabric of life itself, bending it so that you might feel the other, even when they are far. Sometimes this shows itself during major transitions. You may be about to make a decision, and they enter your thoughts with sudden clarity, as if guiding you. Or you may be struggling with something heavy, and you hear a phrase, an echo of something they once said, that brings peace. In those moments, you are not imagining their presence. You are experiencing it through the rhythm of life, which weaves you both into its hidden pattern. This is why the soul does not panic when contact is lost. It does not despair in silence, because it knows that if the bond is real, it will manifest again, not necessarily in physical reunion, but in the quiet affirmations that appear without warning, the feeling that they are near when you need them, the thought that arises exactly when you feel alone, the unshakable sense that they are part of you still, walking beside you even in their absence. There is a deeper intelligence guiding these moments, a kind of sacred architecture that shapes your inner and outer life. And when you have truly known someone in your soul, the architecture adapts to hold them there. The world does not forget what your heart has touched. It remembers, and it reflects that memory in the symbols around you. These encounters may not always bring comfort. Sometimes they stir longing, ache, or sadness. But even then, They remind you that something profound has taken place, something that mattered, something that still matters. For what touches the soul is never erased. It leaves a trace, and that trace appears when you are quiet enough to notice and honest enough to receive. And so, when you experience these moments, when life seems to call their name through symbols, when the world bends gently to remind you of them, do not dismiss it. Do not silence it. It is not merely nostalgia or emotional residue. It is the soul recognizing what still exists and what perhaps never left. For when two souls are joined in love, the universe itself bears witness, and it speaks in ways only the heart can understand. And when you learn to hear it, you realize love does not always need presence to be present. Many believe that love, once interrupted, must end entirely. They speak of closure as if it is something to be attained like an object, something neat and final. But love that is true does not ask for such neatness. It does not end simply because two people part ways. It deepens, matures, transforms. But it does not die. Because love, in its most genuine form, is not bound by time or proximity. It becomes something more enduring, an energetic imprint, a quiet current that continues to move through the inner life of both souls. When two people love each other from the depths of their being, they exchange more than words, more than touch. They exchange energy. They impress their essence onto one another's psyches. These impressions remain long after the physical relationship has faded. And so it is that even in separation, the connection continues. Not in the form of daily communication or shared experience, but in a silent and invisible exchange, subtle yet unmistakable. You may feel them in moments of joy. You may feel them when you are low. Not as a thought, but as a presence. As something unnamed that suddenly moves within you, a shift in your emotional weather, a tug on the string of memory that brings a sensation you cannot explain. That is not a trick of the mind. That is the continuation of the energetic bond that was forged when your souls met and recognized one another. This recognition does not vanish. Once the soul has seen itself in another, it cannot unsee. The patterns that were activated by their presence remain within you, shaping your dreams, influencing your growth, continuing to interact with the parts of you they once awakened. The work of the soul continues in silence. While the ego may insist that things are finished, the psyche knows otherwise. It does not require contact to remain connected. There is something sacred in this. To know that you do not need to possess someone to carry them, that even without speaking you are still in dialogue. Even without holding them, you are still held by the memory of their essence. And sometimes this kind of bond is even more honest than the ones we try to maintain on the surface, where words can mask the truth and appearances deceive. The energetic connection does not lie. It speaks in feelings, in symbols, in the sudden inner knowledge that you are not alone. Sometimes this connection reveals itself in your healing. You find yourself growing in ways they once encouraged. You find yourself becoming more of who you are, not because they are pushing you, but because the part of you that they saw and loved is now alive and moving you forward. This is how their influence continues, like a quiet wind behind your wings, invisible but powerful. At other times, you may feel their pain. You may sense when something is not right in their world, or you may feel sudden warmth, comfort, as if they are thinking of you. These moments are not delusion. They are the movement of energy across a bond that remains alive, though hidden from the eyes. This is not dependency. This is the soul's natural response to genuine union. And while this can be a source of longing, it can also be a source of peace, because once you accept that the connection continues even in silence, you are no longer trapped in the illusion that love must look a certain way to be real. You begin to trust what is unseen. You begin to understand that love does not require the other to be physically present in order to shape your journey. Their essence has become part of your inner life. Their energy lives in the choices you make, the growth you embody, the way you now move through the world with a heart that has been changed. This continuation of connection does not mean you are stuck in the past. On the contrary, it means that the past has become part of your present transformation. The love was not wasted, it was planted, and it continues to bear fruit, not always in shared moments, but in the deeper evolution of who you are becoming. So when you feel them, do not resist it. When you sense their presence, do not fear it. It is not a sign that you have failed to move on. It is a sign that something real happened, something that the soul is still tending to, nurturing, protecting. Let it be. Let it live in its quiet, sacred way. Because some bonds are not meant to end, they are meant to continue, silently, invisibly, eternally. It is one of the greatest paradoxes of life, that the more genuine a connection, the more deeply it seems to remain even after everything visible is gone. Time passes, conversations stop, the rhythm of daily life no longer includes the other, and yet, somewhere deep inside the presence lingers, not as a memory, not as nostalgia, but as something alive, something that continues to evolve within you. This is the nature of soul connections. They are not fixed to the external world. They are not imprisoned by circumstance. They grow with you, silently, as you change. Many believe that love has to look a certain way to be real, that it must be visible, consistent, spoken aloud. But there are forms of love that do not announce themselves. They do not perform. They do not need validation. They live in the quiet. They unfold in the background of your becoming. And these forms of love, though subtle, are the most enduring. They are not based on need or desire, but on recognition, on something in you, seeing something eternal in the other, and never being able to forget it. This is why some people remain with you even after they are gone. Not because you are clinging, not because you are stuck, but because the encounter with them awakened something permanent in your soul. Perhaps they showed you a part of yourself you hadn't yet met. Perhaps they held a space for your truth in a way no one ever had. Or perhaps your two souls simply resonated in a way that could not be explained, but was undeniable. And that resonance cannot be reversed. It does not fade with time. It becomes part of who you are. You do not have to speak to someone to still be in communion with them. The soul does not require sound. It requires truth. And when a connection has been forged in truth, the absence of words does not dissolve it. The mind may wonder if it's over, the world may tell you to move on, but the heart knows better. The heart feels the quiet hum of something still alive, something that does not need to be named or claimed to be real. There is a kind of peace that grows from this knowing, a peace that comes not from understanding, but from surrender, from allowing yourself to feel what is there, without resistance, without needing to define it. You begin to realize that the connection is not a chain keeping you tied to the past. It is a thread that has woven itself into your becoming. And every time you listen to it without trying to force it into form, it teaches you more about what love truly is. Love is not possession. It is not certainty. It is not permanence in the way the ego imagines it. It is an unfolding. It is a presence that sometimes asks you to let go of the form but keep the essence. It asks you to trust what you cannot see, to honor what lives in the unseen places. And it reminds you that some of the most meaningful relationships are not the ones that last in time, but the ones that last in soul. There is a reason why you still feel them, why their name still softens something inside you, why their essence appears in the quiet moments, not to haunt, but to remind you of who you were when you loved purely, and who you still are. Because even if the story between you has ended, the truth it awakened remains. And that truth continues to live within you, reshaping how you see, how you feel, how you love others moving forward. Not all endings are failures. Sometimes the relationship had to shift so the deeper meaning could unfold. Sometimes silence is the space where soul begins to speak more clearly, and sometimes what remains in that silence is not absence, but presence, in its most essential form. When you learn to sit with this, to no longer chase the form, but to feel the essence, you are no longer at war with the past. You are at peace with what was, and in that peace, you become open again. Open not only to love in the future, but to the mysterious ongoing life of the connection that still dwells quietly within you. What began in time may have ended in time, but what began in soul continues beyond it. If this touched something deep within you, if you've ever felt a connection you couldn't explain, that still lives on even in silence, then you're not alone. These bonds are real, and they shape our inner world more than we often realize. To dive even deeper into this mystery, watch the next video. This is why you still feel their energy, even when they're gone. It will help you understand the energetic threads that continue to bind two souls long after words have ended. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because real love never disappears, it only changes form.